I regret that we did not do it earlier. I'm pleased it is happening now. The problem I didn't see, and I should have seen, was the hurt that people were feeling as a result of the banking and financial sector.
It doesn't give me any pleasure to say this, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if it ends up being in excess of $1 billion.
But just so we can try to put this in some useful context, this is the return to customers of their money that was first wrongfully taken from them dating back to 2008 or 2009.
Around that time, that's correct.
And so far, the actual compensation that's been paid is about $260 million.
That's right.
And ultimately, you expect that at some time in the future, the total amount will, on the present estimate, be $850 million.
That's right.
So there's only another $790 million to go on the present estimate. I'm sorry, there's only another $590 million to go on the present estimate.
You've done the maths well there, yes.
Well, not the first time. And then, assuming it gets over $1 billion, there'll be another $150 million or so to be reimbursed to those customers?
There could well be. I base that statement on the assumption that there will be entities that are not necessarily part of the big five, so to speak, who may have fees for no service issues. We've already had 5 or so breach reports from other entities. And it's also the fact that for the 4 largest banks in AMP, that they are still working through the amount they will have to pay back, especially in their related licensees. Typically, the work is less advanced in those areas, and that's where there's considerable engagement on ASIC's part.
Banks and finance companies have put profits before people and been motivated by greed. The Royal Commission made this blunt finding today as it released a damning initial report into misconduct and poor behaviour. The Commissioner, Kenneth Hayne, found that most of the conduct broke existing laws, and yet there have rarely been prosecutions. But he hasn't yet made any recommendations, and bank shares rose in relief. Finance correspondent Stephen Long begins our coverage.
Delivered to the Governor-General, a document that slams the banks and regulators. 1,000 pages detailing how the financial system and those who oversee it have failed the nation.
A frank and scathing assessment of the culture, conduct and compliance of our financial system.
A culture exposed in the hearings that saw the dead charged money for financial advice and the most vulnerable people conned and ripped off in the pursuit of sales.
Make no mistake, today is a day of shame for Australia's banks.
How did it happen? The Commissioner says, too often the answer seems to be greed, the pursuit of short-term profits at the expense of basic standards of honesty. Kenneth Hayne's report is withering about the conduct of a corporate cop that preferred to do deals with offenders rather than prosecute them. It says, when misconduct was revealed, it either went unpunished or the consequences did not meet the seriousness of what had been done.
Good boy.
Natasha Keys is among the thousands aggrieved by the banks. She just wanted time to harvest and pay her debt. CBA wouldn't wait and took her farm.
I went to ASIC out of frustration. I was told that my problems weren't systemic and that they weren't significant enough for ASIC to take on board or to investigate.
Commonwealth Bank whistleblower Jeff Morris helped spark the Royal Commission.
I think it's at the stage where these regulators need to be disbanded and we need a new regulator.
A government that only reluctantly called the Royal Commission now has to confront the problems.
We will take the action necessary to restore the public's confidence and trust in our financial system, which is a vitally important part of the Australian economy.
Given this damning interim report, we believe that there is a strong case to consider extending the Banking Royal Commission.
The interim report asks more questions than it answers, but in broad terms the answers are implied. We need regulators who aren't captured by the firms they regulate. and laws rigorously enforced to make the finance system behave fairly and honestly. Values, the report says, have been sadly lacking. ASIC says it will carefully consider the report's observations. Stephen Long, ABC News.